Today's video is brought to you by Eufy Security. Just a few years ago, Viltrox released their original Fujifilm lens, the 85mm. But today, they've released their very best lens ever, the super wide-angle 13mm f1.4. Hi everyone, welcome to Pal to Tech. This is a video I have wanted to make for quite a while. I have had a copy of this lens for the past 5 months, and now that it's finally been released, we're going to take a closer look at it. First, a disclaimer. Although Viltrox was kind enough to send us a copy of this lens, I am not being paid by Viltrox to do this review. They had no input into its creation, nor were they allowed to see this video until right now when it's been published for everyone. The new 13mm is Viltrox's 5th prime lens for Fujifilm's X-mount. I've tested and reviewed all of the other 4 Fujifilm lenses from Viltrox. And let me just say up front right now to save you some time, this is Viltrox's best lens yet. It's not even a close call. Okay, great, we're done. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you... All right, I'll continue. This new 13mm lens is not cheap, coming in at a cost of about $470. Taking it out of the box, it was immediately noticeable how great the build quality of this lens is. It's solid metal and weighs 420 grams. The lens also comes with a lens hood that's also made from metal. And there's a small cloth bag. On the lens itself is a USB-C port, which allows you to connect your lens directly to your computer to update the firmware. The front of the lens is a 67mm filter size, and the lens itself contains 14 elements in 11 groups. The apertures go from f16 to all the way wide open at f1.4. The minimum focus distance on this lens is 22 centimeters. Keep in mind that this lens is not weather sealed. The aperture ring is my absolute favorite. It's a great feeling, clickable ring that gives you adjustments at 1/3 of a stop each. Likewise, the focus ring is also great. Nice and wide with just the right amount of turn feel to it. For a long time, I have been using the 16mm Fujifilm Prime, and I've gotten pretty used to its focal length. But I must say that there is something I absolutely love about the 13mm Ultra Wide-Angle Prime. You just get that extra field of view, and it can make such a huge difference. This 13mm focal length would be wonderful for architecture and landscape. The colors with this lens are pleasing, if not rich and warm throughout. But I think the greatest image quality feature this lens has is the kind of subject isolation and background that you can get. When you open up the lens to a 1.4 aperture, check out this background. It gives you one heck of a narrow field of view. Here's the same angle at f8. Have a look at the difference. I love how f1.4 took this background right here and turned it into this. And obviously with a 13mm, you get a wider field of view. Even at f2.5, the background's just beautiful. Look at that. And I'm at ISO 1600 here. This lens is beautifully sharp where you want it to be. Have a look at this. There's something about the 13mm that it's wide enough to tell a story. And that's what I felt during the time I was using this lens. And even at f5, we've got just this wonderful subject isolation. Here's f2.8 again, and I've zoomed into 200% now. And here it is at 400%. I found that f2.8 on this lens across all of my images is the perfect mix of wonderful background, beautiful subject isolation, and great center sharpness. And here at f7.1, you've got a little bit of starbursting going on, but that's easily fixed dropping down to f2.8. Now, something to remember, obviously, is that if you're not used to an f1.4 aperture, remember that you have very little depth of field to work with. I mean, pretty much that's the only thing in this shot that's in focus. Everything else is background. Look at that. Let's take a closer look now at sharpness and contrast performance across the different apertures. Okay, here I am at f1.4 and f5.6. Zoomed in at 100%. And I'll tell you, at 100%, in the center, these are very close with regard to sharpness. You do see areas of the center that perform slightly better at f5.6. You also have more contrast. But when you compare f5.6 to f16, you can clearly see a difference. If I drop down to f11, it gets a little bit better, but still noticeable. It really isn't until f8 that things start to get pretty similar to f5.6. Overall, the sharpest aperture for the center I found was f4. However, f2.8 also performed well. Now on the corners, they're a bit on the blurry side at f16. Not a great place to be. They do get better once you start opening up the lens. Then they get a bit softer again as you move toward f2 and f1.4. This lens definitely has some noticeable chromatic aberration at f1.4. It drops off considerably at f2, and it's pretty much gone at f2.8. Now I did notice some lens flaring with this lens. Have a look at it here around f5.6, and you can see the purple fringing and general flaring on the edges as I move the camera around. Overall though, I thought lens flaring on this lens wasn't too bad at all. Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce today's video sponsor, Eufy Security, and their new Video Doorbell Dual. You know, sitting right here in my studio, I can't see who arrives at my front door entrance. And I've had issues with unauthorized individuals getting into my studio, stealing my lenses, and getting away with it. The new Eufy Video Doorbell Dual allows you to capture on video exactly who is at your front door, allowing you to see and talk to them in real time using the app. The weather-resistant Video Doorbell Dual has 2 cameras built into it. There's a 2K front-facing 160-degree camera that focuses on the general area at your door. But then there's a second 1080p camera that's downward-facing so that you get a very clear view of any packages or items that are left at your door. That way you'll know the second your awesome camera gear arrives. The doorbell unit also has a built-in scanner for body heat and allows the phone app to notify you if someone arrives or if there is motion outside your door. And this dual detection motion system reduces false alarms by 95%. It scans your doorstep and notifies you if you have a package. Another great feature is this base unit right here. You get 16 gigabytes of local video storage, and that'll give you about 90 days worth of access to past visitor activity. This is great because your footage is kept locally. You're not forced to use the cloud and pay those ongoing monthly subscription fees or dealing with privacy issues. Installation could not be easier. To power the unit, you either connect it to the wiring of your existing doorbell, or you just mount it directly to the wall and use its own USB rechargeable battery. Now, running it off the battery will give you about 6 months between charges. Now, the app has a lot of features, including the ability to set motion control zones, review your footage, zoom in to see what your packages are, and have a two-way conversation with anyone that arrives at your door. Hey, go away! Get out of here! I will leave a link in the description down below this video where you can check out more info on the Video Doorbell Dual. In the meantime, I want to thank Eufy Security for both sponsoring this video and supporting the channel. Now, back to the review. Now let's compare the 13mm Viltrox with the 10 to 24mm Fujifilm at the 13mm focal length. And also, just for fun, I'll test it against the Rokinon 12mm cinema lens. Okay, both images are shot at f5.6. Image on the left is the Viltrox, image on the right is the Fujifilm 10 to 24 at about 13mm. No question about it, the Viltrox is sharper in the center. It also has more contrast. Interestingly though, around the corners, they're roughly the same. I would say the Viltrox is still slightly sharper. Okay, comparing it to the 12mm Rokinon cinema lens now. Definitely richer colors and more contrast in the Viltrox. And what I found was better corner sharpness. Keep in mind, once again, this is not a scientific test, and this is the cinema version of the Rokinon 12mm. Now this lens uses a stepping motor for autofocus, and overall I found that the autofocus performance was capable to some native Fujifilm lenses. It's certainly not as fast as the 90mm Fujifilm Prime, but it is the fastest autofocusing third-party lens that I have ever tested. Now Face Eye Auto Detect isn't quite 100% as what I have found on Fujifilm lenses, but it's the best Viltrox has released to date. Sometimes it did fail to quickly acquire the face when the subject would be moving towards you. And you're definitely going to want on this lens, like you would with any lens, to play around with your APS-C custom settings to be sure that you get the best results. If you plan on shooting video with this lens, you will not be disappointed. I love everything about this lens for video. The wide angle, the colors, the sharpness, and the autofocus. Now, if you have an X-T4 or any Fujifilm camera with IBIS, then this lens gets even better. Look at how the lens nicely stays locked on focus, and even with IBIS turned on, it has a minimum of background distortion. Video autofocus is the best of any lens that Viltrox has ever made. But like any lens you have on your camera, its effectiveness is greatly improved if you correctly set your AFC settings to match what you're trying to shoot. Like shooting stills with video, Face-Eye Auto Detect did sometimes struggle with moving subjects. But I wouldn't say it's a huge issue, except perhaps in a testing environment where you're zigzagging back and forth trying to fool the lens. Let's talk for a second about focus breathing. To put it simply, there is not much focus breathing at all on this lens. And without doubt, it is the best Viltrox lens I've used to date in how it handles focus breathing. I have had this lens for the past 5 months, but I couldn't complete and publish this video because of the delays in the Viltrox product launch. And so I've had plenty of time to consider very carefully what I should say in this conclusion. The Viltrox 13mm lens sells, at the time of this video, for $470. That's not cheap. In fact, this is the most expensive Viltrox lens ever released for Fujifilm. However, the 16mm Fujifilm Prime sells for $1,000, more than double the price. Obviously, there's a difference in focal lengths between 13mm and 16mm, and definite optical benefits to the 16mm Prime, such as closer focus distance and a slightly better background. That being said, I found myself falling in love with the 13mm focal length over the 16. That 13mm just gives you a bit more room in your frame to tell your story. So while overall, yeah, the 16mm is slightly better optically, it certainly isn't twice as good, which the price between these two lenses would have you think. So should you get this Viltrox lens? Well, that's such a personal decision based on your focal length needs, your budget, and the type of shooting that you do. You know, this is the first time I've ever put a third-party lens on my Fujifilm camera and then just forgot that it was a third-party lens. It's as if this thing was made by Fuji. Quite frankly, while I was using this, I forgot all about what kind of lens it was and the focal length and all that, and I just enjoyed shooting and getting beautiful shots with it. And that is what a great lens is all about. What I can say is this: Viltrox didn't just hit a home run with this lens. They damn well knocked it out of the ballpark. Well, I can finally finish this review. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you found the video helpful or at least entertaining. And if you did, be sure to give it the like and subscribe. I'm going to be signing off now, but have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you in a new video next week. Take care.